What is the creepiest glitch in the Matrix you've experienced? Had a dream about being on the phone with my great uncle who I hadn't seen in years. Later that day, he called and wanted to talk about the same thing we had discussed in the dream. Freaked me right the duck out. I had a similar experience, but it was the night my grandpa passed away. I didn't know until the next morning that he had died. But in my dream my dad, my brother and my cousin and I just sat on the deck of my childhood home drinking whiskey and laughing. It was an incredibly long dream, and no words were exchanged. Just feelings and laughter. Might not be the same kind of glitch in the system sort of thing, but it was one of the weirder things to ever happen to me. I had this crazy vivid dream in 7th grade. I dreamed that there was a white cargo van parked outside my house. A man got out, walked to my house, broke in, then went to my brother's room and killed him. I woke up freaked out. It was 3 AM. I couldn't sleep and went into the kitchen. Turned the light on and a few seconds later the headlights on a white cargo van outside flipped on and it sped away. Edit. Changed lucid to vivid. I only vaguely remember the incident, but one night, very late, both of my grandparents were woken up by a loud sound. My grandmother swore it was a shotgun. My grandpap said it was a car backfiring since there was no one nearby who would be shooting. We lived pretty much far from anyone, but near a highway. They bickered over it a bit then went back to bed. About 15 minutes or so later the phone rang. It was my aunt. Her husband had been shot with a shotgun by a neighbor just 20 minutes before. The thing is, they live 7 states away. Did he survive? No. Point blank in the chest. My mom has some friends that I've known my whole life. They're her age. Mom was single, so they used to babysit me sometimes. I went over to their apartment for Halloween when I was 4 and they took me trick-or-treating around their apartment complex. Fast forward 27 years. I'm married to a girl I met in college, who had been born in the city I was raised in but almost immediately moved away. Was less than a year old. She'd lived in other parts of our large metro, DFW, and the LA area growing up. She's heard my mom and I mention these family friends occasionally but never met them. Wife and I throw a Christmas party to celebrate our new house. My mom asks if she can invite said friends, so I said of course. They arrive and we get to chatting. They ask about my wife's unusual maiden name and if she knew people who have the same first names as her parents. These family friends of ours were her parents' neighbors, as in share a wall. Literally the only other door on the 2nd floor of the same building, at the time my now wife was born. I'm 3 years, 9 months older than my wife. Our family friends' neighbors had an 8-month-old infant when I went trick-or-treating at their house. I met my future wife as an infant out of total happenstance before not meeting her for another 18+ years. When I was 14 or so I went to sleep at my typical time and woke up 2 days later in the morning. I went downstairs panicking and asking if my family knew I had been sleeping for 2 days and what had happened. The question was ignored and they told me to sit down and have some breakfast. My mum used to work during the day and leave me home alone when I was around 12 or 13 and too old for daycare. She would ring the home phone periodically throughout the day and make sure everything was alright. One day I'm home alone and the phone rings. I pick it up. It's Mum. We have a short, succinct conversation that's basically everything going alright? Yeah, okay, don't answer the door if anyone knocks, etc. Very normal conversation. It ends. I hang up and go about my day. Not even 15 minutes later the phone rings again. I pick up and it's Mum again. We exchange hellos and I jokingly say, "Must be a slow day. You literally just rang me." And Mum goes very quiet for a minute and then says, "I haven't called you today." My blood went cold. And to this day I still don't know who called me. We came up with a secret password after that. Post of mine from earlier last year. About a year ago my mom and I were in the first parking space area of a small shopping mall. She was getting things ready for the store and I was waiting. The space in front of us was parked a large white SUV. I can't explain why, but I had the urge to study the SUV when I usually don't even pay attention. The family that owned the SUV came out and it was a father, infant in a carrier and a little girl. The little girl stared at us the whole time her father was getting her in the car. She had this huge oversized bow in her hair and a side ponytail and just kept staring. Even as they walked to the driver's side, she didn't take her eyes off of us. The father packed her up. My mom also stared at her. It was so strange. We went into the store right after the whole family was in the SUV. When we went to open the door, the same family came out. Odd little girl. Father. Baby and father was still holding shopping bags. My mom and I looked at each other in horror because it took him 5 minutes to pack his kids in that SUV. How could he get out and run into the store in the few seconds it took us to walk to the sidewalk in front of the store? We weren't the only ones who saw it. A worker from the food place next to the store saw it and we all exchanged looks of horror. I have no idea what this was, but I can tell you that very few people have believed me and my mom. I had a dream of my ex-girlfriend before I met her. Red hair, hazel eyes, standing at the corner of where 3 streets meet. She was holding a purple luggage bag and crying. Turns out, 2 years later, that was where we'd be when we broke up. Funny enough, several years later, I now live at the apartment building where that corner is. I smoke in the back lane to avoid looking at it. When I was younger, my parents took me to see the Polar Express. It was a great movie. In the early summer morning, I thanked her again for taking us to the movies. She had no idea what I was talking about. Later in the year, around Christmas, we went to the movies. I sat in horror as I watched the Polar Express the opening week and knew exactly what was going to happen. I remember a time when I was about 9 or 10 and I was riding in a work truck with my father. He suddenly got a call on his phone. And when answered it, it went straight to speaker and a deep distorted voice started yelling at us to get the duck out of the truck or I'll ducking mare dare you. The worst part was that my dad didn't even react. Just grabbed the phone and ended the call. I used to get freaked out by the same customers coming in and getting the same products several times a day. Then I remembered I work in a liquor store and all my regulars are alcoholics. When my friend gave a nodding what's up to my dog and the dog did the same thing back. Amazing. That's not a glitch. That's a feature. Walking with my daughter on a side street in the French Quarter in New Orleans late at night. Back to the hotel. We hear a drunk couple giggling and walking quickly behind us. Obviously getting ready to overtake us. So we step aside to let them pass. Only to turn around and find that no one's there. There were no side streets or alleys until further up the block. Just shuttered doors with steps going up to them. I get the deja vu feeling all of the time during conversations. Like I've had the exact conversation before. In the same place. And everything that happens after it for a little while feels familiar too. Sometimes I go to completely new places and feel like I've seen it before too. Scientists have found that deja vu is essentially a tiny seizure in the brain that causes the part that recalls memories to crossfire with the part that creates new ones. So your brain thinks you've been here before when really it hasn't. Okay, I have this memory and no one will believe me, but here we go. When I was probably 10 or 11, my mom was harping on me for not doing my chores. She was downstairs with me and I stormed upstairs to avoid her. When I got upstairs, she was in the kitchen doing dishes. There are no other ways to the second floor. She smiled and I almost shat myself. Everyone insisted it was a dream. I was coming from work and went to my apartment. There is 2 apartments per floor. I am in the lobby waiting for the elevator and Regine, my neighbor, gets out of it. We have a small talk and she tells me she is going to a repartee concert. I get into the elevator and went to my floor. Door opens and waiting for the elevator was Regine again. I was 5 years old and I was playing in the living room. Suddenly one of my toys, a train pilot, lifted up Wingardium Leviosa style. It lasted only like 5 seconds and during all of it I just froze. Then it suddenly dropped and I started screaming and crying. The only person that was in the house at the time was my nanny and she was in the kitchen. No one believed me, of course. You can also imagine my disappointment when I didn't get my Hogwarts letter at 11. I frequent a mall that is only in my dreams. I go there a few times a year. Can't explain it. It doesn't exist. But it does exist when I'm in the dream. This isn't the only thing either. Anyone else get something similar? I was having a dream where I was singing. I woke up very suddenly from it. And then I heard some super loud screaming. It went on for a few seconds and it was enough time for me to shoot up and still hear it for a few seconds. I wasn't alone in the house and after the screaming stopped it was dead quiet. No one else heard anything. One night, I was startled half to death by the sound of a train horn outside my window. I was not living anywhere near any sort of railway. And nobody else in my household had heard it. I was watching TV with my dad. It was movie with Robert Redford and there was scene his character was playing snooker or something and my dad made a funny comment about it. I laughed. Few minutes later I went to kitchen and heard my dad making the same comment with the same voice second time. Rushed back to the TV room and there is the same scene from few minutes ago. I didn't laugh. Goosebumps all over my body instead. Next day I asked him about it. He said there was TV transmission glitch. And as he knows my fav movie is Matrix he made this perfect deja vu joke. He said my shock was priceless. Yet my dad is a troll. I was once walking in a park at night when I saw something green shoot up into the sky. Like a firework but it didn't burst. It temporarily lit up the sky and then it got dark again as the flash faded. Moments later I heard a very loud sound like a transformer having power go through it and the next time I blinked it was bright and in the middle of the day. Not sure where the lost time went. And I didn't feel tired or anything. Unfortunately I didn't have any obligations like work or anything so I really have no idea of knowing. When I was a kid, my family came upon the aftermath of a horrific car accident. Traffic was backed up and we slowly crept by while my parents tried, and failed, to distract us kids from the carnage. Later that night, the accident was on the news. Small town. Not much else to report. They showed the accident scene and all four of us gasped shouted at the same time those at the same cars. Everything else about the accident scene was identical. But the makes, models, colors of the cars were completely different from what all four of us remembered. We consulted amongst ourselves and we all remembered the same thing. But the image on the screen was totally different. We talked about that for months. I've posted this before, so I'll try to make it short. I was working with a friend on building some shelves in a cubby hole in his garage. He had 2 planks, each of which he was going to cut in half to make shelves. He cut one in half, brought it into the garage. Then we decided to make lunch. Came back out and there were no cut shelves. Just 2 whole planks. A couple months ago I woke up to the voices of my uncle and my brother. It was my uncle asking is he still in a coma? With my brother replying yeah. In a super sad voice. That one has since stuck me up pretty bad. I just figure I should resume normal harmonious stuff in the event I was dreaming. I got a long voicemail message from a person named Liz addressing me by name saying we haven't talked in so long and to call her back so we can catch up. I don't even know Liz. I have no idea how she got my number either. I have a very vivid memory of a very tall thin elderly African American man sitting in a white green armchair. This man has glasses, wearing a button-down shirt and dress slacks. I described this man to my parents one day around the age of 5-7 years old. Gave as much detail as I could and my mom goes down to the basement. She comes back with a single photo and shows it to me. It's exactly who I described. Same man. Same chair. The man is my great-grandfather. He died in 1977. I was born in 1991. My great-uncle died He left a collection of matchbooks from expensive hotels around the world, hundreds of them in a glass bowl. I dug around in the bowl hoping to find a Zippo lighter. There was no reason for me to think there was a Zippo in the bowl. I dug and dug through the huge pile and found nothing. As I walked away, I realized I was holding a Zippo lighter in my hand. I have no memory of finding or taking the lighter out of the bowl. Was FaceTiming with my GF. When my eye could hear my boss. His phone somehow could hear and see us. As he seemed just as confused. To this day I think he hacked in somehow to see her naked or some shit, but no clue. Like, why would he be talking? It was very strange. Back in the early 90s when my cousin and I would talk on the phone, landlines of course, to each other all day long. We heard someone else talking for about a 3-day period. It was a male voice, and of course now I don't remember anything that he was saying. He couldn't hear us, though, and we couldn't hear the other person he was talking to. It was very clear, as there was some static with it. I was watching TV when I was about 11 when I had this sudden compulsion to turn off all the lights in the house. I literally jumped up and ran from room to room. When I got to my bedroom on another floor, I saw that my net curtain had blown over my desk lamp and was smoking. It caught fire the second I got to it. I managed to put it out just in time. I had a dream about marrying my husband before I even knew he existed. Even in my dream I was asking people who this person was, and when I actually met him I had to refrain from freaking out. A house I rented a few years back had an ADT security system in it. We used it but never had any problems while living in that area, thankfully, that we know of. One night, something in the house emitted an extremely loud single pulse of what was some type of alarm. Thinking somebody must have just broken in, I grabbed one of my gums and ended up clearing out the house. No sign of anybody anywhere having been inside. No windows, doors opened or damaged. Nothing. We tested the alarm the next day and, having never done so before, were a bit confused, freaked out when we realized the system doesn't even make the sound we heard. We were never able to get the system to replicate the sound and therefore have no idea what actually happened that night. I don't believe in anything paranormal, but this really did happen to me. I used to have a recurring nightmare of the World Trade Center Twin Towers falling down and crushing me. Then 9/11 happened. I would have thought I had some deja vu, but I told many of my friends about this dream long before 9/11. After 9/11 I never had this dream again. Weird, right? When I was very young, maybe 5 or 6, I tried to watch a VHS tape of a movie I liked. Nothing but static. I tried my Barney tape. Static again. I called my mom into the room and I had already ejected the tape. She pushed it in and pressed play exactly like I had moments before. It worked perfectly fine. She just thought I did it wrong and went back to her room across the hall. Immediately static. I ran into her room and showed her. She came back in and it was playing. No one believed me. I could go on and on about the glitches I've experienced in my lifetime.